There is a number that nobody in the poker industry wants you to know. A number so brutal that if most players truly understood what it meant, they would question everything about their poker journey right now, in this moment. The number is 90%. 90% of players who start this game with real dreams of winning consistently will quit within 2 years. Not quit winning, quit entirely, walk away forever, convinced they do not have what it takes, convinced the game is rigged against them personally, convinced variance is simply too brutal for any human to survive long term. And here is the part that should terrify you. Most of these players were not stupid. They were not lazy. Many studied harder than you are studying right now. Many watched training videos just like this one, taking notes, trying to apply every concept. Many genuinely believed with complete certainty they were doing everything right. Yet they still failed, session after session, month after month, bleeding chips without understanding why, till they finally gave up, blaming luck, blaming the algorithm, blaming anything except the actual patterns destroying them from the inside. And it gets worse. Those patterns are invisible. You cannot see them in your own game. You cannot feel them operating. They work beneath conscious awareness, silently bleeding your bankroll, silently eroding your confidence until one day you realize you have been losing for months and you have no idea why. Black Rain 79 analyzed hundreds of thousands of hands and concluded that only 30% of players are winners long term. But here is the number that matters more. Only 10% are significant winners. Players who make real money. Players who could actually go professional. 10%. Think about what that means at a 9-handed table. Only one player is actually profiting over time. Everyone else is funding that player's win rate, whether they know it or not, whether they admit it or not. The question is not whether you can beat those odds. You absolutely can. The question is what separates the 10% who win from the 90% who quit, and whether you are building the patterns of a winner right now, or unconsciously replicating the patterns of someone who will be gone in 18 months. No matter how much they love this game today, no matter how certain they are that they are different, here is what nobody tells you about the 90% who quit. They were not different from you. They had the same dreams, the same dedication, the same belief that hard work would eventually pay off. Many studied more than you study. Many played more volume than you play. Many believed with absolute certainty they were doing everything right, and still they failed. This is the first brutal truth. The first reason 90% quit is that poker feels personal when it is actually mathematical. Every loss registers in your brain as failure. Every bad beat feels like evidence that you specifically are cursed. But here is what the research actually shows. The National Institutes of Health published a study analyzing poker performance across massive samples. What they found was disturbing. Even highly skilled players with significant proven edges can experience losing stretches lasting months, where the results look statistically identical to losing players with no edge at all. Read that again. Months of losing. Playing correct poker. Making optimal decisions. Still losing every week. And if your brain interprets those losses as evidence about your ability, you will crack. You will start doubting correct decisions. You will start making adjustments that are actually mistakes. You will respond to variance as if it were signal about your skill when it is actually just noise. But here is what nobody tells you. The players who survive this phase are not stronger than you. They are not mentally tougher or more disciplined by nature. They simply built a different framework for interpreting results. They learned to separate decision quality from outcome quality. They learned that their job is to make the best decision possible with available information and then release attachment to what happens next, because what happens next is mathematics, not personal, not a judgment on who you are, just probability expressing itself exactly as the numbers predict. This is the second brutal truth. The second reason 90% quit is that they treat poker as a hobby instead of a skill development process. They play poker. They do not study poker. They experience hands emotionally. They do not analyze hands systematically. They accumulate hours at the tables feeling like they are improving, feeling like experience itself is making them better. But here is what the data shows. Experience without deliberate analysis produces zero improvement. You can play 50,000 hours and be no better than when you started. Worse, actually, because those hours reinforce mistakes. They deepen bad habits into permanent automatic patterns that become harder to change the longer they persist. Automatic Poker analyzed over 600 players with at least 10,000 hands each. Only 18% had a solid positive win rate. Nearly half were significant losers, bleeding money consistently over years of play. And here is the pattern that separated winners from losers. It was not talent. It was not natural card sense. It was not intelligence. It was systematic study habits applied consistently over time. Winners review their hands after sessions. They identify specific leaks and work deliberately to fix them. They track results looking for patterns. They compare their play to training material looking for gaps between what they know and what they execute under pressure. They treat every session as data for improvement, not just entertainment. Losers play for the experience and the action. They log hours without reflection. They blame external factors for negative results. They repeat the same patterns for years, sometimes decades, without ever questioning whether those patterns are actually optimal or just comfortable habits they never examined. James Clear wrote something that applies perfectly to poker. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. Every player has the goal of winning. Goals are meaningless. What separates winners from losers is systems that convert effort into improvement. And this is where everything breaks for most players. They have goals. They have dreams. They have genuine dedication, but they have no system. So they grind and grind, feeling like progress, while nothing actually changes. The third brutal truth. The third reason 90% quit is they never learn to survive variance psychologically. And let me be absolutely clear about what variance means in poker. It is not a gentle wave that rocks your bankroll back and forth within comfortable parameters. It is a brutal, merciless force that can produce losing stretches lasting weeks or months, even when you play perfectly, even when every decision is mathematically optimal, even when you do everything right. Black Rain 79 documented this extensively. Even the biggest winners in online poker history can go extended periods without a single winning session. Weeks of perfect play producing nothing but losses. This is enough to make almost anyone crack. And the players who quit during these inevitable downswings are not weaker than the players who survive. They are not less intelligent or less dedicated. They simply never built the psychological infrastructure required to endure what poker inevitably delivers to everyone who plays it seriously. But here is what nobody tells you. That infrastructure is not talent. It is architecture. It can be built deliberately by anyone willing to do the work. Nurse, this is exactly why most players never escape this cycle. They try to fix strategy without fixing the system that executes it. They study ranges and frequencies while their psychology collapses under pressure. They memorize GTO outputs while tilt destroys every decision they make when it matters most. They accumulate knowledge without building the architecture that allows them to access that knowledge when the stakes are highest and emotions are running hot. That is why I built the Mind of a Grinder collection too. Not another strategy course. Not more information you will forget the moment variance hits. A complete operating system for how you think and decide and execute when everything is going wrong. 10 ebooks covering every dimension of the mental game. Variance management frameworks that actually work under pressure. Tilt intervention protocols that catch spirals before they destroy sessions. Session architecture that prevents leaks before they happen. Identity frameworks that keep you stable through winning and losing streaks. Recovery systems that prevent burnout from accumulating silently over months. Plus 5 premium bonuses, including the complete protocol library and the session baseline mapping tool that shows you exactly when and where you leak the most. $29.89. Launch price only. In a few days, this price increases permanently. Think about what one bad session costs you. One tilted call you knew was wrong but made anyway. One shot you took when you should have stayed disciplined. $29 is nothing compared to the money you are bleeding right now through patterns you cannot even see. The link is in the pinned comment below this video. If you are serious about being in the 10%, this is where it starts. Not with more strategy, not with more volume, with better architecture. Click it now, then come right back, because the next reasons I am about to reveal are even more expensive than the first 3. And most players never even realize these are destroying them. Welcome back. The fourth reason 90% quit is the identity problem, and this is where the psychology gets deep. When your identity as a person is attached to your poker results, you become fragile in ways that make sustained success literally impossible. Winning streaks create dangerous overconfidence. You start believing you are better than you actually are because recent results seem to prove it. You move up stakes before your skills support that level. You take shots your bankroll cannot handle. You play looser because you feel invincible. Then variance corrects, as it always does, as it mathematically must, and you crash hard, because your inflated self-image cannot survive contact with negative results, because you built your confidence on outcomes you do not control instead of process you do control. Losing streaks create the opposite problem. You start believing you are worse than you actually are. You lose confidence in decisions you should make automatically. You play scared and passive. You fold when you should attack. You miss value everywhere because you no longer trust yourself. Your psychology contracts and your win rate contracts with it in a devastating feedback loop that accelerates until you quit. Here is what separates the 10%. They decoupled identity from results completely. They know who they are as players independent of any session or month or year of outcomes. They evaluate themselves on process quality, not outcome quality. They take genuine pride in making good decisions regardless of whether those decisions won or lost money in the short term. This psychological stability allows them to play their A game consistently, win or lose, running hot or running cold. Because their internal state is not controlled by external variance, they cannot influence. Jared Tendler calls this concept your floor. Your ceiling is determined by what you know. Your floor is determined by how you perform when everything goes wrong. Winners have high floors because their psychology does not collapse when variance turns against them. Losers have low floors because every downswing triggers an identity crisis that corrupts their decision-making for weeks or months afterward. And here is the brutal truth. If your floor is low, no amount of strategy knowledge will save you. You will learn everything and execute nothing when it actually matters. The fifth reason 90% quit is burnout. And almost nobody recognizes it until the damage is catastrophic and sometimes permanent. Burnout does not announce itself with obvious symptoms that force you to stop. It accumulates silently in the background while you keep grinding, while you keep telling yourself and everyone around you that everything is fine, while you ignore the warning signs your body and mind are screaming at you. Poker burnout is fundamentally different from tiredness after a long session. It is chronic exhaustion that develops over months and years of grinding without adequate recovery. Decision fatigue that makes every choice at the table feel harder than it should feel given your experience level. Irritability that shows up as tilt in situations that never used to bother you at all. Loss of motivation that makes you dread sessions you once genuinely looked forward to and loved. Reduced cognitive function that leads to basic mistakes you would never make when mentally fresh. Emotional numbness that disconnects you from the feedback signals your brain needs to make accurate reads. And here is why burnout is so dangerous. It compounds on itself. It makes you play worse, which creates more losses, which creates more stress, which deepens the burnout further. A vicious cycle that accelerates until something breaks. Till you either quit the game entirely or destroy your mental health trying not to. The players who avoid burnout understand something most grinders miss completely. Poker is a marathon that can last decades, not a sprint that lasts months. They set firm limits on session length and honor those limits even when they feel fine. They schedule real recovery time away from the tables. They maintain lives outside poker that provide meaning and joy beyond the game. They treat their mental health as their primary competitive asset, because they understand that no amount of strategic knowledge matters if your brain is too depleted to execute it under pressure. The sixth reason 90% quit is isolation. They try to succeed at one of the most psychologically demanding games in existence completely alone. They study alone without anyone to discuss concepts with or challenge their assumptions. They play alone without anyone to share the emotional weight with when variance punishes them. They process wins and losses alone, internalizing everything without release or perspective. And over time, this isolation becomes a force multiplier that compounds every other problem. When you have no one to discuss hands with, your analysis is permanently limited to your own blind spots. You literally cannot see what you cannot see. No matter how intelligent you are, no matter how honest you try to be with yourself, there are patterns in your game that require outside perspective to identify. When you have no one to share the emotional weight of downswings with, that weight accumulates inside you. Session after session, week after week, month after month, until it becomes unbearable, till something has to give. When you have no one holding you accountable to your study schedule and your session limits, and your bankroll rules, the discipline required to maintain those standards eventually erodes, because willpower alone is never sufficient for sustained behavior change over the long term. You need external structure supporting your internal motivation. The research on learning and skill development across every domain is absolutely clear on this point. We retain approximately 10% of what we read passively. We retain approximately 90% of what we actively teach to others. This is why study groups work when solo study fails. This is why coaching produces results that self-study cannot match. This is why community creates improvement that isolated grinding can never replicate. The act of explaining why a decision is correct to another person forces you to understand it at a deeper level than passive consumption ever could. The feedback you receive catches errors in your thinking that you would never notice alone. The accountability creates structure that supports you when motivation wavers. Winners build communities around themselves deliberately. They find training partners. They join study groups. They hire coaches. They invest in relationships with other serious players who challenge them and support them. Losers grind alone, convinced they can figure everything out without help. The evidence says otherwise. Isolated improvement is dramatically slower and far less likely to succeed than collaborative learning with others who understand what you are going through because they are going through it too. And so what actually separates the 10% who win consistently over years and decades from the 90% who eventually quit, convinced the game was rigged against them? After everything we have covered, the answer is clear. It is not talent. It is not intelligence. It is not luck or natural ability or some secret technique that winners know and losers do not. The answer is architecture. The 10% deliberately built complete systems that address every dimension of what poker actually requires for sustained long-term success. Psychological frameworks for processing variance without cracking under the weight of losing streaks that can last months. Systematic study habits that convert experience into genuine measurable improvement instead of just logging hours that reinforce existing mistakes. Bankroll management protocols that make going broke literally impossible during the inevitable downswings. Mathematics guarantees will happen. Tilt intervention systems that catch emotional spirals before they corrupt decisions across entire sessions or weeks. Identity frameworks that completely decouple self-worth from short-term results, allowing stable performance through both winning and losing periods. Recovery routines that prevent burnout from accumulating silently over months and years until it destroys the ability to perform. Communities and support structures that provide accountability and collaborative learning and emotional processing. None of these systems require unusual talent or lucky genetics or some special gift you either have or do not have. They require only awareness that these dimensions matter and commitment to building the architecture that addresses each one deliberately. The reason 90% quit is not that poker is too hard for normal people to beat. It is that they tried to succeed at a complex psychological performance game using only strategic knowledge, while ignoring everything else that determines whether that knowledge can actually be executed under real-world conditions. They learned what hands to play, but never learned how to maintain decision quality when losing. They memorized ranges, but never learned how to prevent tilt from corrupting those ranges when emotions run hot. The difference between winners and quitters is not knowledge. It is architecture. The mind of a grinder. Collection 2 is that architecture built specifically for players who are ready to stop grinding without systems and start building the foundation that makes long-term success actually possible. 10 ebooks, 5 premium bonuses, $29.89. Link in pinned comment. The 90% keeps doing what they have been doing. That is why they quit. The 10% builds different systems. That is why they win. Which one are you going to be? Click the link. Make the choice. Build the architecture. If this video shifted your perspective, smash that like button and subscribe for more content that goes beyond surface strategy into the real factors that determine who wins and who quits. Share this with one friend who needs to hear it before they become another casualty of the 90%. See you in the next one.